All right, Michael Stuart, who is coming up now, he is an on-screen actor, radio DJ, event MC, and he's always been a believer, but wasn't living the life. How many of us can attest to that? Michael knew there was more than he was experiencing, and God made it abundantly clear that he was pursuing him through a series of life events that included the death of his mom at a young age. Since then, Michael has worked and lived in 7 states and owns Michael Stuart Productions. He'll share his story of his mom's passing, how God literally spoke to him through a stranger and his future wife, and how God placed Michael in a situation where he saved a man's life after an unlikely accident just a few houses down the street. Wow. All right, put your hands together as we hear the testimony of Michael Stuart.
How do I look? Do I line up okay in the camera? You guys can hear me okay? It's first time on a microphone. I'm going to hope to make the next 2 hours entertaining for you. A couple of you went 2 hours. I'm not. Thank you so much, first of all, for everybody being here. I took notes, and you can tell you're getting old when you don't want to use your glasses and it's at 49 font. And I still can't see it. So I know my time is limited here, but I want to share. There's 4 particular things that I want to make sure I get across today. And then it's really, really one of those things where I know God was working in my life when he's literally talking to you in one story and he's moving you. And I'm one of those guys who believe that this is like a giant chessboard and God is the ultimate chess maker and he's moving this here and moving this here and making everything, because finally we're going to have a checkmate. We're not there yet, but I'm looking forward to that time. So I'm going to start with some of these stories, and then if we have a little bit of time, I'll kind of come back and share a little bit about what I do now. But I was born in Santa Monica, California, way back when Marcus Welby was on the air. For all you old people, you know that. And I was raised the first 10 years of my life in in North Hollywood. My mom was a single mom. My mom and dad were never married, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit in just a minute. But we lived out there, but my mom was originally from the South, Mobile and the surrounding area in Alabama. And one day at 10 years old, she decided it was time to move back to the South. So I went from LA to LA, Lower Alabama. And y'all want to talk about a culture shock. Here's this long-haired blonde guy comes in here and everybody, they're dipping skull and talking really funny and stuff like that. So that was a treat. But hang on, I want to just make sure I follow my notes so I don't kind of get off track, because for those of you who know me, that can happen. Oh, and by the way, for those of you who do know me and know that my beautiful sweet wife, order number 5, your order's ready. Carrie couldn't be here today. She works at Chick-fil-A and it's chicken plucking day, so she's not here today. So once I got to Mobile, I was 10 years old. That was different. Ended up going to Citronelle High School. And I have some classmates that are tuning in today. So hi, guys. Good to see you guys. I had a very interesting time in high school because early on there was some bullying going on. And it wasn't for me. It was for me. But once I got into the 11th grade and got the lead in the junior play, and I was playing baritone in my high school band and things like that, they kind of saw that I wasn't as bad as maybe what they thought from California. Fast forward to, I'll tell you, while I was also in high school, I sang in a band. I had my own band, and we played music and played parties and things like that. And I was a skate guard and a DJ at the skating rink. And so that kind of like led into my whole career right there. When I finally graduated, 2 weeks later, I moved back to Mobile, because Citronelle, by the way, is about 45 miles outside of Mobile, Alabama. Very hot, but just a really cool place to be. In January of 1984, I was working at some skating rinks. I had some teen club gigs. I was also working at some nightclubs, and I was also a delivery guy for Domino's Pizza and a day manager, and I still barely could pay my rent with all of that stuff going on. And back then, rent was only $200 a month. Amen, right? So I was invited to be a guest DJ on a local radio station, and I went in there, and I remember walking out of there after that hour being on the air, and I said, that's what I want to do. And I bugged them for like 3 weeks, and they hired me part-time. And I used to play the Casey Kasem's American Top 40. They would come in on these albums. I'd be on the air at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning and be queuing those things up. And those were the good old days when Casey was around and all that. But one of the things that we did for the radio station was we had a promotion where we would go to the local football games and give away an award, like it was called the Crusher Award. I think Orange Crush was the sponsor. And one night we were giving away a skateboard, and I did the night show. I had a pretty popular night show back at the radio station by then. And this was probably about 1985 or so, almost 86, maybe early 86. And when I pulled out the name for the skateboard live on the air, it was Shane, and we had the same last name. And I thought, well, that's a coincidence. So that following Monday, this young man, he was like 13 years old. They came to the radio station with his mom, and they wanted to meet me. So they called me up, and I got to talking to him. And I remember his mom looking at me, and she said to him, he says, "Doesn't he look like Donnie?" And I said, "Who's Donnie?" And she said, "Well, that's my husband's oldest son from his first marriage." And Shane was like, "Yeah, man, it's kind of crazy. They look a lot alike." So I didn't think anything of it. A couple of days later, I was talking to an aunt and uncle, and I was telling them that story, and I could just see her. I knew she had something she wanted to say. And I said, "What's going on?" And she goes, "Well, you can't tell your mama. You got to promise not to tell your mama." She said, "But and let me preface this by saying my mom always said she didn't know where my dad was, thought he was a traveling salesman." So Aunt Peggy proceeds to tell me that my dad lived in Mobile his whole life. It was right there. And that was probably his wife and his son. And so I looked it up in the phone book, and sure enough, that was his wife and that was his son. That would make him my half brother. And so I reached out to him and told him who I was. And we got to meet. We spent some time together. We had a small relationship. It wasn't like the greatest thing relationship that you could have, but Shane, my half brother, and that Donnie that we talked about, we still are in touch to this day. So that was 40 years ago when this all took place. So that was the first time that I knew that God was really kind of working in my story. And remember, I wasn't really a praying guy. I wasn't going to church or anything like that. Always a believer, but wasn't living the life, if you know what I mean. The whole rock and roll and radio and things like that. But then in January of 95, I'd gotten a call from a radio station in Destin, Florida. And they said, "Hey, we got your name. We're looking for someone to program our radio station. That'd be like the boss. And if you know anything about any kind of job, you climb that ladder." I started part-time, worked my way up. This was a dream come true, and it was Destin, Florida. And the whole time I'm thinking, I can't take this job because my mom's in hospice. Now, she wasn't like on her deathbed or anything, but she had COPD, and that was the early years of that. So they were still trying to treat that, and she had a hard time walking. So she was in the hospital, but I wanted to go see this interview and meet these people. And so I went over on a Sunday morning. It was January. It was a beautiful day. If anybody's been down to Destin, Crab Island and the Emerald Coast, you couldn't ask for a more beautiful day. A great radio station, had good equipment, good people. He took me to a place. He said, "Here's where you could live and rent. It's right on the water on Joe's Bayou." And it was amazing. I can't tell you how incredible it was. And then I'm driving home the whole time sad because I was like, I can't say yes. I got to turn this job down. So I got home and I was pretty tired. So I didn't go visit my mom that night. I went to bed about 10 o'clock, and then the phone rang at about 1:50 in the morning, and they said, "Your mom just died." And I'm thinking, but she wasn't there. Like, yeah, no, it's really weird. She just died. So I went down, took care of all that stuff. And I remember coming back to my apartment, and I sat there trying to figure out, that whole reality thing. Is this real? Is this real life? It was just kind of weird trying to figure things out. And then it just hit me. It was so clear, popped into my head. It was like a voice just said, "You have to take that job." So I called them at 8 o'clock and I said, "My mom just died. I want the job." And they said, "You have the job. Just let us know when you're ready." So a week later, I was moving over to Destin, Florida, and starting my new dream job. And And then when I got there, I met someone I married. I have two wonderful kids from that marriage, Grant and Sydney. And so if my mom hadn't have died that night, I wouldn't have taken that job. I wouldn't be standing here with you folks today. And I often wonder what my life would be like now if he hadn't have taken my mom at that time. So I knew, again, here's another time I was like, man, God's really working in my life. So I started going to church, started being that praying guy, you know, being that family dad and things like that. And I knew that that just really, you know, really kind of turned my life around and such. Um, so in she mentioned I've been in several states, you know, California, Mobile. I worked at radio stations in Pensacola, Florida, Charleston, South Carolina, Colorado Springs, Nashua, New Hampshire. And then in, I think it was 2005, I got a call from a radio station in Peachtree City. You know it is, I think it's the Joy FM now, but it used to be J93.3. And they were calling to offer me a job to be on the air and do their radio production and such, and flew me up here and loved it. We loved the place, and we moved up in 2005, and unfortunately got divorced in 2007. And then in 2008, I was let go from the radio station. And I used to be kind of embarrassed and ashamed to say that I had no money at one point. But I realize now through the people that I know and in my life, most of them rich, that I'm not embarrassed by that anymore. You know, I was never taught the fine art of spending. I was that guy that said, hey, I got $1. What do y'all want to do? To put it in the bank? No, let's go to McDonald's. And so, so when I lost my job, I had no 401k, no savings. I had less than $1,000 in the bank. I mean, literally had nothing. I was paying child support now, things like that, and wondering how I was going to make it. And I remember getting on my knees and making a bold, you know, this is it, Lord. This is where we're, you know, I want to make sure that we're on the same page with each other. And I wanted to take my part-time voiceover business full time. And I said, I'm tired of working for the man, people controlling my money and my emotions and everything. And 2 days later, the Gospel Music Channel, which I don't think it exists anymore, but it was in Atlanta, the video channel, they called and said, hey, we wanted to know if you wanted to write for some of our video shows. And I was like, yes, please. And 2 days later after that, a Christian radio station in Pensacola owned by a friend of mine, he called and said, hey, you want to do some on-air stuff, you know, remote and do product? Yes, please. You know, and it just kind of trickled in. It was like God was up there thumping little nuggets at me, you know, doop, doop, doop. And those kind of grew and grew until where we are today, where I own my voiceover production company, and I MC events, and I'm an actor on TV and movies and commercials and all kinds of fun stuff. I'm also a host of a podcast. Bryn Briggs is over there. If you guys know the Eden Project that works with veterans and some active military folks, we do a podcast together called the After Action Report. And I also the host of the City of Fayetteville's podcast too. So, and I'm still trying to pay the rent. But so I stay very, very busy. But again, God got me here. And I want to make sure you understand, this isn't really my story. This is God's story, and I'm just kind of the narrator, you know? So now we're up to one of my favorite stories, how I met my wife, Carrie. So I was doing some online dating for a while, and it was weird. It was fun, but it was a little weird. You met all kinds of interesting people and all. And but I went through a period, and this is not a brag thing, but I never really had problems with dating in the past. But for about a year and a half, I was just getting more no's. I was getting ghosting. I was getting yeses and then cancellations. And I mean, it just went on. And I kept thinking, what? This is kind of strange. I'm not used to this. And so I had a blind date. She wasn't blind. We'd never met before, but we were meeting at the Starbucks when it used to be at the Avenue in Peachtree City. About 2:30, she's not there. I'm texting, I'm calling. By the way, she still hasn't shown up. And that was like 2015. No, 2016. It was January. And I remember I wasn't mad. I kind of felt like I was on a hidden camera show or something. And then I thought, well, I'm going to go get a steak, and I'm going to go home and watch a movie with my cat, Gib. And And I did. So I get to the grocery store and I'm shopping around. I'm over in the produce section and I bump into a lady that I remember meeting, but I didn't know who she was. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that she's in the audience today. So, and I didn't know she was coming today. So now I'm like, oh, I hope I tell it right. So she says, hey, you go to that Andy Stanley church, Southside. And I did at the time. And I said, yes, ma'am. She goes, well, I'm Cindy Horniman. Hey, Cindy. And I'm like, I'm Michael. And she goes, yeah, we met at that Starbucks. And we just kind of talked less than 5 minutes. I think I don't know, we talked about Charles Stanley, how much you're a big fan of Charles. And I talked about a Bible that I had from him and all, just a little small talk. And I remember this, she said, well, I'm gonna let you go ahead and shop. And Cindy turned away and walked a few steps away from me. And I remember she stopped facing away and I saw her head kind of do this. And then she turned back around, she came over to me and she grabbed me by my arm and she said, I just want you to know, God just put it on my heart to tell you that all these problems you've been having with dating lately. Now, we never said a word about any of this. I never talked about my personal sucky date life, you know? But she said, all these problems you've been having with dating and all that's been going on, God sees it. He knows it. And he told me to tell you, just wait. He's got someone for you. You need to wait just a little bit longer. So mouth's hanging open, flies in and out. Cindy said, that's what I needed to say. And she just walked away. And so I was kind of like, what just happened here? I mean, I kind of feel like God was talking to me. Nah, it's got to be a coincidence. So I go home and I open up my devotional for that Saturday morning. And it was one company and they had the Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I'm God. Oh, that's nice. Watched my movie, had a great time, cat date, petting the cat. Next morning, go to church. Before I go, I open up my another devotional that I have on Sunday, and lo and behold, be still and know that I'm God. 2 companies, same verse. Go to church, I come home, I open up my laptop, I get on Facebook, and the very first post on there was a picture of a stream, and it said, be still and know that I'm God. Slammed that thing and went, yes, please. I knew God was, that you don't get any clearer of God speaking to you directly than what happened between Cindy and me in that Publix and what went on. I immediately got off all online dating. I got rid of all the ghosting numbers because, you're still hoping maybe one day they'll reach back out. But blind date coffee girl, will you ever call? And so I got rid of all the numbers, everything, and I just focused on my relationship with God. And that was January. In June, I'm pulling up into the Southern Credit Union and depositing the few dollars that I had to put in there. And Sally was working there and she says, hey, Michael, I want you to meet this new girl. She just transferred over yesterday out of the blue. Like wasn't a plan. It just kind of happened like the day before. And we're training her. Her name is Carrie. And I looked over and was like, and got all stupid. And, well, I guess I need to come back and make more deposits and said stupid stuff. And I'm like, meanwhile, just shut up, drive away, just drive away now. A couple days later, I came back and there's Carrie again, a little small talk, had my kids. She gave them a lollipop. She didn't give me one, but she gave them one. So I reached out to somebody who worked in the credit union. I said, tell me about this new girl, Carrie. And they said, oh, she's single. She's real sweet. Been to lunch with her. Would you like me to put in a good word for you? Yes, please. And got her number. I called her on a Tuesday at 8:24. We talked for 50 minutes that night, and she agreed to get up early and meet me for coffee at the same place the other girl stood me up. And she met me for coffee, and we have been together ever since. That's one of those moments. Again, God's still working on my story through all of that. And she's, but I need to throw this side note in because, she's a keeper. On 4th of July weekend, it was, the usual 142 degrees outside. And we went hiking over at Cochrane Mill. And just hot and sweaty and nasty. And we were sitting there by a waterfall. And I jokingly said, we may be sweaty and everything, but my armpits are dry as a bone and smells like I just got out of the shower. And she said, no way. And I remember holding up my arm and I said, try it. That woman smelled my armpit and I knew I wasn't letting her go. There's not a whole lot of women who would do that. And she did, by the way, she said, that's amazing because it was dry and smelled like I just got out of the shower. So if you want my secrets for my deodorant afterwards, you just guys come see me and we'll let you know. We got married, by the way, on August 8 of 18, 8/8/18. That's just because I'm older than her and I might forget my anniversary. And so that's why we did that. So now in August of 2022, and this is a hard story for me to tell. So back in the 80s, I told you all that nightclub stuff. A friend of mine, his name was Al Dice. Al borrowed $40 from me. And if you know, back in the day, $40 was a lot of money, especially when you're always broke. And then he promised to pay it back, and we would meet. We would say, meet me over here at a certain time. And we didn't have cell phones. You had to go to a payphone, all that stuff. And I would show up and he wouldn't show up. And this went on. And then one night there was some drinking at a bar, and a friend of mine convinced me to go with him over to where Al was staying at a house and get my money. And I am so totally ashamed of that night that, again, it's hard to talk about. I mean, it wasn't, I guess, per se too bad, but we kind of bullied him. And I'm not that guy. I never want to be that guy. And I think that night is the epitome of the worst that I could be. He didn't deserve just the humiliation that we did. And so it has haunted me for 40 years. So in 2022, I said, I'm going to look for Al. Spent a lot of time searching, and I finally find Al on Facebook. He's a pastor. And I reached out to him, and I had this long, man, you just don't know, that night, all these apologies and all that. His reply was, Michael, I forgave you a long time ago. And that was life-changing for me. So I said, listen, let's catch up and get together. The next week, I was going to MC my high school reunion back in Mobile, and I was driving down there, and I called him. It was a Thursday, and we talked for like 40 minutes. And at the end, he said, hey, listen, I'm probably going to have to go here. I'm at the ER. I'm in the waiting room. I think I'm having a heart attack. And I'm waiting. You just spent 40 minutes on the phone with me. You're having a heart attack and you're waiting in the hospital and you're spending it with me. Man, I'm praying he doesn't die. I don't want to be the last thing that he remembers, So I went and saw him the next day at the hospital and just reminisced, and we're still in touch and pals to this day. And so again, God's working on the story. He's redeeming, and he's showing you that there's forgiveness. And my men's group, several of my men's group buddies are here today and from our church. We just finished a Forgiving Forward series in a book. And it truly, Al was the epitome of forgiving forward, just knowing how to forgive, even when you don't deserve it, even when they don't ask for it. And that's a beautiful thing that I think a lot of people, they don't understand how that works or how they can do it, but it changed me that year, a couple of years ago. So the last God story, the last of the 4 stories I want to share with you was, I told you about how God's the master chess player and puts us in the right place at the right time and all. My buddy, Don Dyke, who's sitting back there in the back. Hey, Don, thanks for being here, buddy. So Don and I were supposed to walk the lake one morning. We were going to get up, meet over there and, do our exercise because, trying to work on those love handles. And he texted me and said he didn't sleep well that night. And so he had to cancel. And I thought, no worries, I'll just hang out here and catch up on some work. And also I made my oatmeal, went up to my office, and I took a bite of my oatmeal. And all of a sudden I heard this, sounded like a small crash. So I went to the window and I opened up the window and I looked down the street about 3 houses down, and there was a truck parked on the side of the road this way, and there was a car parked behind it. And all of a sudden I heard a woman screaming, oh my God, oh my God. And it was just like this kind of blood curdling kind of thing. So I put down my oatmeal, I grabbed my phone, and I shot down the stairs, and I'm running down the street in barefoot, shorts, and a t-shirt. And in my mind, I'm running like Steve Austin, the $6 million man. And meanwhile, I'm sure it was like, oh, I'm coming. And so I'm trying to analyze what's going on. And in my mind, I think, okay, this car must have hit the back of that truck because it's parked on the side of the road. And I see a girl on the phone. I see a boy in the back. He's crying and he's on the phone. And I really wasn't prepared for when I came around the back of the truck, there was a man laying on the street. And he was on the phone, surprisingly. And next to him was his severed leg from about the knee down, just laying there. And I've been on sets and I've seen props and stuff like that, but it was just like in the movies. This part was bleeding. There was blood everywhere. The boy's, crying. He's 19 years old. And I said, "Are you on the phone with 911?" And she said, "Yeah." And I looked down at that guy. And if I'm being totally honest, in my mind and in my heart, right at that moment, I said, wow, it's really bad that there's nobody here to help this guy. And then immediately I turned around and faced away and I looked up at the sky and I prayed the shortest prayer I've ever prayed. And it came out just like this: be here now. 3 words. I turned back around and asked her, I said, "Do you have a belt?" She said, "No." And I looked down and he had a belt on. So I got down next to him and I said, "Hey," it turns out his name is Jamie. I said, "Hey, I need to take your belt off." He said, "Yeah, yeah." And he was on the phone. You could tell he was in shock. And so kind of got that belt off of him. His pants were still kind of down because they were still kind of attached to the back of his truck. And just to tell you what happened, he was a worker going to be working on that yard because these were still being built, the houses. And the car was coming up the hill very slow, like 14 miles an hour. And you know that sun, that morning sun, when it gets on you and it just blinds you. And I mean, literally, you can't see anything. And they just drove into the back of the truck while the guy was standing there. And his knee and the what do you call that thing? The pulley, the what? Yeah, the trail hitch. And it just took his leg off. So anyway, so I get his belt off and I start wrapping it around his thighs, his left thigh. And I realize it won't work, with the holes. So I have to pull it even tighter and just hold it. And I told him, I said, "This might hurt. I'm really sorry that I got to do this." And then he hands me his phone and says, "Talk to boss." Okay. And Jamie doesn't speak a whole lot of English. So I got on the phone and it was his boss. And he goes, "Hey man, what's going on?" I was like, "Well, he said he was just yelling, 'My leg, my leg.'" And I said, "He's had an accident. He's lost his leg and he asked you to be here." And so we're talking and I gave him back the phone. And it just seems like it was just literally like 6 or 7 minutes, which is really strange because that morning it was this was 5 minutes to 8 and they had shift change and 3 other major calls and everybody was out. And the fact that they got somebody there when they did was that was a God thing. So the paramedic comes up and he looks at me and he says, "Who put that tourniquet on?" And I thought, "Oh man, I'm in trouble." And I said, "Well, I did." And he goes, "You just saved his life." And then so he starts working on him and another paramedic comes over and said, "Who put that tourniquet on?" It's like, that's going to be the question of the morning. "I did." He says, "You just saved his life." And so they put the tourniquets on, took care of him. The life flight came in. They took him down to the life flight and they flew him off to Grady. The boss guy that I was on the phone with showed up. The mom for the kids that were in the car showed up, and I was able to kind of chat with them and hopefully, calm them down a little bit. And I kept in touch with them for a little over a year or so, and then they just kind of fade away. But the strange thing to me is that nobody in the neighborhood ever came out. I saw people looking out windows. I saw people standing on the porch, but nobody came over to the scene to help. And this is one of those things where if Don hadn't have felt good or didn't get sleep that night, we wouldn't have been there to save that man. And I think Jamie would be dead. So I know in my heart of hearts that God moves people. You may not understand why you need to go to the store right now or why I have to do this right now, but that's God working on you to put you in the place that he needs you to be, to help other people. And I know that I was blessed to do that. And so a couple of weeks later or a week later, they had me down to the fire department. I thought they were just going to give me this little plaque, but the news was there and they ended up being on a double story news because they did story for that. And then they came back. Jamie wanted to meet me in person and he wanted to meet me where the accident was. So that was a whole news story there. And that was kind of interesting. Again, it wasn't about me. But I know people that are so humble, they never want to share anything like that. But I'm here to tell you that we are God's tools. It's just like when you build a house. Yeah, nobody's going to be talking about that hammer and that screwdriver, but if you didn't have them, you couldn't build a house. God's got stories that are going on, and each one of us are tools in everybody's story, everybody that you come across. And so, like I said, I'm just the tool. This isn't my story, it's his, but I want to be the one to share it so everybody knows who the author is and who that, who that great person is. I don't know. I think we're kind of getting close on time. So, Russ, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here in just a second, but I kind of wrote this part out because it came to me, and I just know that if God can take a guy like me, and we're all sinners, every one of us, and I'm a sinner. And when I was young, I let fame and popularity and the celebrityness. I mean, back in the day, I couldn't go anywhere without people buying me dinner or lunch or movies, or, I mean, I didn't pay for anything back in the day. And it filled my head, and it put me in the wrong state of mind. I didn't handle it very well. So I went from being a guy who put me first, who now I no longer want to do that. But again, you have to kind of still be that tool. But I know that if he can take someone like me and turn him into somebody who does his best to put others first and take away that conceitedness and give me wonderful children, an amazing wife, and opportunities to save someone's life, if so be it, and forgive the stupid, stupid things I have done in my life. And there's way too many to count. Then I know that he can do it for other people as well by accepting Jesus into your life as your Lord and Savior. I do believe that love, not to be confused with tolerance, because I think that's a thing right now in the world, but love, forgiveness, grace, and Jesus are the meaning and the keys to this life. Folks, I'm blown away by how many people are here. Thank you so much. I know your time is precious. It's not lost on me at all. And I thank you for being part of here, how the story about how God's been working in my life. Thank you so much. Now here comes Russ with the hard questions.
Hey, Michael.
Hi.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as you know, I took copious notes.
A lot of notes.
The a roller rink is where it all got started.
Yeah, High Roller Family Skate Center in Citronelle, Alabama.
And you kind of did the microphone and did the
Couple skate. Yep.
Backward skate. Backward skate. I could never backward skate. I don't think this one's working.
I don't think that's on.
I think we're gonna have to share this one. So so you did and then you got invited to go to a radio station, did the Casey Kasem countdown top 40.
Yeah, and that went on from like 9 to 1, but they put me on the air live from 6 to 9, and I sounded like Mickey Mouse. It was probably not fun to listen to, but those were some great memories of my early start in radio.
Isn't that funny how things get started and then you're kind of still doing the same thing even today?
Yeah, so radio, I would say, has been my main background for well over 40 years because I'm a lot older than I look.
We won't tell anybody. So you did then you had this dream job that opened up in Destin, but you didn't feel you could take it because mom was in hospice, and then you come back and she passes away that night.
That very night, exactly. And that was what was so strange for me is that she wasn't, there was no talk of anything like she could go at any time, nothing like that. And so, it was very clear what that was for me. I'm sure there's other people might go, it was just coincidence, but not for me. That was God. I need you to be here, and I need you to be here, and I got a lot of things in store for you. So
yeah, I bet it was your mom too, saying,
oh, I'm sure
she didn't want to hold you up.
Yeah.
And it's so then you ended up meeting your half brother that was in Montgomery.
No, it was Mobile, Alabama.
In Mobile. So that kind of was must have been kind of strange or interesting.
It really was, but it found out, I found out a lot about my dad over the years. My dad was promiscuous, and a little side note, sorry if any family's watching and didn't know this, but yeah, to this date now, we have discovered 7 other siblings with
Wow.
multiple different mothers. And so I think I'm friends with Facebook on some of them. I don't.
So you would say he was busy.
He was a busy man.
So
Now I will say this: my father was a party animal, but when he found God, he put it all away. He stopped drinking. He was an alcoholic. He quit drinking, turned into a really, really good man. And again, forgiveness and redemption.
yeah, wow, that's amazing. But so you were doing online dating and you quit that and you found you found Cindy.
Yeah, Cindy found me, and Cindy Horniman is if anybody's talking to anybody, it's her for sure. I know in this room, but that was just another miraculous moment. Again, if that girl had not shown up, I would have went on the date or we would have stayed there, and I would have met her, and Carrie wouldn't be in my life. And again, it's every little. Y'all remember that song "A Different Corner" by George Michael? He said, "Turn a different corner, and we never would have met." And how the rest of your life changes by every little decision that you make in your life. It's just amazing when you really dwell on it,
Yeah, and then your last story of the young man who had his leg cut off. I mean, that was amazing that you heard the screams and you responded and kind of God gave you the wits to know what to do. And it's
Yeah, someone asked me did you ever play like a doctor on any of your acting things? And I hadn't, but I just remembered you got to stop the bleeding. And so,
yeah. So, well, I like the way that you were able to look back on your life and see where God has taken you, see where God has intervened, see these, what we call them coincidences, but are really, God incidents.
Mhm.
And it's orchestrates things, and which is I think a tribute to the power of prayer, that when we pray and we believe, God works.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't do things immediately. He's not a vending machine, but we can look back and see where the hand of God has been.
Yeah, and you don't always see it until like long afterwards. You look back and go, "That was God." But these are particular moments when I know for sure that He was really working, and directly in my life at that time. And the hindsight 2020 thing. I mean, I think I can look back and go, "That was probably God. That was probably." But these particular moments that I shared with everybody today, they truly were right on. I knew it when it was happening. I mean, when I wasn't going to help that man. I was like that. Like I said, it's too bad this guy's going to die. And but I guess God said, "Nope, not today." And so,
yeah, amazing. Well, Lord bless you. Thank you for sharing. It's a wonderful testimony, and thank you so much. Let's give Michael another hand. Thank you. So.